My name is Tiffany Q, and welcome to my ABRSM Grade 5 Theory Lessons series, where I record snippets of my live lessons with my students. Please note that this is not a substitute for a textbook. If you're preparing for the theory exam, I would still recommend having a teacher to guide you through both the coursework and exam paper preparation. There are 4 different clefs that you need to be very familiar with for your ABRSM. And the first one is the treble clef, which I'm sure you know very well. Then we have the bass clef, the alto clef, which may be new, and we also have the tenor clef. Now you'll notice that the alto clef and the tenor clef look very, very similar. In fact, they are identical, but their positioning on the stave is what differentiates them. So the alto clef is very centralized, it's bang in snug in the middle of the stave, and the tenor clef is just a little bit higher. Okay, you can see it's sort of floating there a little bit above the stave. So what you'll need to be able to do is to be able to read music in all of the clefs, and you also need to be able to tell where the notes are in relation to each other. So I'll explain that in a second. Why do we have so many different clefs in music? Well, the reason is we have so many different instruments and they all have different ranges. Imagine if we were playing the piano and we only had the treble clef. How would we be able to write those very low notes? It'd be very impossible if we had to write out lots of ledger lines in order to go to a low note. Okay, because the piano has a very large range. So certain instruments, low instruments, may use the bass clef, like the cello. Some may use the alto clef, like the viola, because the bass clef is a bit too low for them, but the treble clef is a bit too high for them, so they kind of like to be in the middle. Tenor clef is used by the trombone, and sometimes by the cello as well. So, for pianists, we always learn about the middle C. So I'm going to talk about this as the middle C. So even if you're not a pianist, this is the new name for this note. This is the middle C in the treble clef. In the bass clef, the same note is written up here. Okay, so you can even see the difference. For the treble clef, the middle C is quite low. For the bass clef, the middle C is quite high. Now for the alto clef, the middle C is actually bang there. Okay, in the middle. And then the tenor clef, it's also sort of, there's a pattern here. It's in the middle of the clef, but the clef is slightly raised above the stave. Okay, so these are the middle C's of all the clefs. Once you have that information, you can sort of plot the different notes. So I'm going to plot this E here. And that E will look like this in the bass clef. In the alto clef, that E is going to be up here. And for the tenor clef, it's going to be up here. So if you don't play an instrument that uses the alto or tenor clef, or the bass clef if you're a violinist, it really doesn't matter. You don't need to be able to read all these as well as the clef that you're usually using for your instrument, but what you do need to know is how to work it out accurately. So counting is a very good thing, I find. Another trick that I like to use is intervals. So this C to this C, I know that's 1 octave. And if I go down here, I know that's 1 octave. So if I need to find this C, I can just go down a whole octave, and I know this one is a C as well. So if that's a C, that's a D, and that's an E, F, G, A, B, and back to C. So how did I quickly tell that was an octave? So you can either do it by just knowing what your interval looks like. The other thing you can do is you can imagine it in a different clef. So for example, if I were in the treble clef, that would be a B, right? And I know a B an octave lower is this note. So if this note in the alto clef is a C, then an octave lower, you know, this is B and this is also a B, then if this is a C, this is also a C, which is the exact same. So many sort of tricks to find out which notes are which. In the exam, you will be not only required to know what the notes look like on a different clef, but they will ask you some tricky questions that require you to transpose it an octave higher or an octave lower. So if I have this A here, and I say, okay, what is that an octave lower in the bass clef? Well, I know that an octave lower in the treble clef is going to be this note, and I know that this note is this one in the bass clef. So that's all fine and dandy. What if we wanted this note 2 octaves lower in the tenor clef? Okay, so, well, that 1 octave lower is this G, and then another octave lower is going to be this. So I need to find this note in the tenor clef. So I know in the tenor clef that this is a middle C, and in the treble clef this is a middle C. So that there is a 4th below. So if I go, this is C, B, A, G. This note must be the same as this note. So being able to move between the octaves is very crucial for grade 5. Enharmonic notes in music are notes that sound the same. They have the same sounding pitch, but they are written differently. So in order to learn more about this, we need to look at our accidentals. So this A on the piano is this note here. If I have an A flat, it becomes this note. If I have an A double flat, then that might be a new accidental, then my flat once. Now flat just means lower it by a semitone. So if I have 2 flats, then I lower it by 2 semitones. This one, and then this one. So A double flat is actually this note here. A sharp, well, that's just A, but raised by a semitone. So it's this one here, A sharp. Now the double sharp looks like an X. So A double sharp, you raise it once, raise it twice. Now this note here that I'm circling is your A double sharp. So back to the enharmonic notes again. Enharmonic notes are notes that sound the same but are written differently. For example, A flat, this note here, can also be called G sharp. So A flat and G sharp are enharmonic notes because they sound the same, but they can be written differently. Let's take a look at one more example. If I take a B, this note here, I can also call that a C flat, because if I go to the C and I lower it by a semitone, I also get this. I can also call it an A double sharp. If I go to the A, I raise it by 1 semitone, I raise it by 2 semitones. So these 3 notes are all enharmonic versions of each other.